Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Rules of Engagement. As always, I'll be your host, Nick axslav ranish, as we explore tactics and strategies used in the game of Starcraft 2. Today, we're going to take a look at the series between MC and Innovation. This series was played to decide who would get third place at the MLG Winter Championships at Dallas. There's a lot of money at the line, so both players busted out their best strats, and it's going to be a pleasure to kind of figure out the ins and outs of all these tactics. We're going to take a look at games 1, 2, and 3 from that series. Of course, it was the best of 3. It's kind of spoiled you it goes 3 games. Oh well. If you haven't seen those games yet, you're crazy. Catch them on youtube.com/official MLGSC2. Also, tweet me any questions you want me to answer at the end of the show during the Q&A section. My Twitter, of course, is @ISAxslav. So go ahead and tweet me questions you want to be answered. Q&A will be after we go over games 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to jump into game number 1. And a couple things I want to point out. Game number 1 are going to be, as a Terran, how you react when you see double gas from a Protoss player, your tank positioning against a Blink Stalker attack, and how to properly defend against DTs. And not just, I mean, everyone's like, oh, you build a turret and you get guys there. How to make some tricks to, if the possibilities of DTs, there's a possibility DTs could come, some tricks that will cost you nothing to make your defense much simpler. So, I'm going to jump into this game at the 5-minute mark. We're looking at this from Innovation's point of view. And we can see he had just SCV scouted his opponent. SCV, of course, died to some vicious unit somewhere. Was probably died to a probe or something. But he got in near and saw there was double gases, right? So when you see there's double gases, there's a couple things that are possibility. One, you know your opponent isn't expanding insanely fast. So he sends these 2 Marines out to scout across the top, around here, along this right side. Why is he doing all the scouting? Well, one, because he saw there wasn't an insanely fast Stalker. He knows there's no insanely hardcore gateway pressure because a lot of resources are being spent towards gas. So it's okay to send the Marines out a little more aggressively early on until you have a few more with them. And double gas means it could be proxy Stargate, which could be up here, could be up here. It could be even proxy pylons being built to later support a DT warping or something like that. So tech plays often involve proxies. So, if you know you're safe to send the Marines out early, just send a couple out to scout around, check for those proxy buildings. So going forward, of course, we see what he's doing is he's doing, the Widow Mine drop, Marine push, right? Except he's not even going to wait for the medevac. He's just going to go up and try to put some pressure off Marines. He can do this because he knows there's not a ton of Stalkers out early. At most, there'd be 2 Stalkers at this point, given the way MC open. So he's the first Stalker there. He's going to corner it in here. And actually, he might be able to take this out of here if he just barely gets out of there. But he's trying to put on some pressure to get more scouting information, right? So he's going to chase the Stalker a bit. But presumably, he's either would head back to check the expansion, or he starts running away now. Why does he start running away? I would have liked to see him actually send 1 Marine all the way in to just double check that expansion. But the reason why I want to head away is because he knows Warp Gate is done, right? So even at the 6:30 mark, right, that's when they can start warping units in very shortly. We can see here the first Warp Gate's done. The first Warp Gate is just going to be turned in as soon as that Stalker's out. So this is a point in time where you don't want to push your Marines all the way into the base because they warp in more Stalkers. They micro the Stalkers to lose all their guys. So maybe it's okay to send 1 Marine, but you just push out, put a little bit of fear into them, then you back away. Going forward, he knows it's double gas. He knows there's Stalkers on the map. He's got to be worried about a Blink Stalker attack. He says it's a very high likelihood that's going to happen. So he starts to put down the bunker and get ready to receive that. Of course, he also has this wall in here. That's going to help out a little bit as well. And he's going to tanks. Siege tanks are the ideal units to stop Blink Stalker attacks. Why? Because they do a lot of damage each hit. And it's instant fire. So there's no blink dodging, and there's no fancy micro where it's like, oh, you can't be once and run away, because each hit does a ton of damage. Also, it has a lot of range. So the fast, mobile, harassing units are best countered by a unit with a ton of range. So you want to place that siege tank in the location. It's very important every time you place a siege tank. Make sure it's in a spot where Stalkers can't attack that siege tank without your Marines shooting at the Stalkers. Why is that so important? Well, yes, if you're going mass siege tank, they're going mass Stalkers, you would win because siege tanks counter Stalkers. If you only have 1 factory, they have 4 warp gates, they're going to have many more Stalkers than you have siege tanks. So yes, siege tanks counter Stalkers, but not 1 or 2 versus 14 here, right? So anytime you have a siege tank, you want to make sure that the Stalkers try to get in range to shoot it, and you're in this area right here. Your Marines could, of course, get a couple Stalker kills, which will make it a bad trade for them. So as you go forward, always keep that in mind. Yes, you want to move down and take your natural, but make sure you never have exposed siege tanks where the stalkers can isolate them with a single blink and pick it off and run away. So going forward here, what is Innovation going to do? He's going to try to take his low ground expansion. And what's the best way to do that? Well, you want to leapfrog the tanks so stalkers can't be annoying. But you also, like I said, you want to make sure, for example, this tank right here, right? We look at this tank right here. Where can stalkers attack this tank from? Well, let's take a look at this in the actual, try to figure out the ranges and put numbers and everything. So, stalkers can attack this tank from roughly this area, right? I mean, of course, from inside the base as well, but, there's other tanks and bunkers and stuff. So, this area is where stalkers can attack a siege tank that are threatening. Well, where can he place Marines that he can protect that siege tank so stalkers blink in, the Marines can take him out? Well, let's look at the range of his Marines here. Oops. Sorry, guys. So the Marines, if their Marines are on the ledge, they probably have a range of something like this, right? And as long as that crossover of your Marine range versus the stalker range into your tank is high like this, as long as the Marines are close to the edge, you're probably going to be okay. But if the Marines are off the edge and you don't have this red line overlap, all of a sudden you're in a big trouble. So anytime you're maneuvering around the map like this with siege tanks against blink stalkers, be very careful of the placement, especially if you siege this tank up here. You have to have Marines in this section here. If Marines aren't in this section where the overhang is, that tank becomes insanely vulnerable. Or if you had these two tanks right behind it, you might be okay as well. But the tank on its own is very vulnerable. So with the Marines right here, right? Remember, there's no Marines on the edge. If the observer notices that, sees the Marines are off the edge, what can MC do? Well, he can easily come in here with a single blink. See, the Marines, they're not up here. They're behind a tank. That means with these Marines, if you take a look at what these Marines can shoot, right? The Marines can only shoot about this section, right? And while this whole section, of course, the stalkers can shoot the tank, the Marines can only shoot at that little section right there. That's not nearly enough to make it so the stalkers can't go in and pick off that tank. And as we can see here, that's exactly what the stalkers do. So yes, a couple Marines, actually he's not even shooting. Like his Marines were on move command, so he only got a couple shots off, damaged one stalker. But you have to be very careful with your siege tank positioning. Always make sure that they're like in this location where stalkers can't access them without coming into Marine range. Of course, eventually you get to the point where, he has combat shields done, and then he has a couple medevacs out. And once you have upgraded Marines, you have a medevac, you can heal them. You can push out with just plain Marines a little bit easier. Because, yes, stalkers with blink can be annoying. They can pick at your Marines. With the medevac, what harass would have killed one Marine, it would have killed a second Marine, and it would have damaged 3. Now, all that happened is it just killed 1 Marine. So the stalkers, they can be annoying, but with the medevac, it's much less damage being done because you can heal up any damage they do. And that allows you to push out across the map and try to get some damage done. Now, the next thing you're thinking is, okay, I'm Innovation. I built an expansion. I only gave him 1 tank. Otherwise, the blink stalkers did very little damage because I reacted quickly to them. What's a possible way my opponent could come back? I know this army is basically impossible to stop, right? Even without stim, it's tanks and Marines. He doesn't have any tech up. He was on one base for so long, he can't stop his attack. DTs are a possibility. I know he has blink, so it's pretty easy to go to DTs. So one thing you always want to do, always make sure you have walls up, right? Ideally, you might even try to set a wall here, although against blink stalkers, that's a little dangerous. But definitely always have a wall in between your main and natural. Blink stalkers early on will sometimes kill your depot. Just rebuild it. As soon as you push the blink stalkers away, you're moving out, rebuild that wall. The wall is exceptionally important because against Dark Templar, right? If you have nothing, you have no eBay up, right? Like, there's no eBay. Innovation has no eBay, and he has 1 scan. Shortly, he'll have 2 scans. But if you don't have a wall, DTs get 1 DT gets in your main, 1 gets in your natural, what happens? Well, you scan to 1 in your natural, you kill it. You scan to 1 in your main, you kill it. Then, of course, he warps in more DTs, and you lose the game because you just died. So if you have the wall, what happens is you can raise this wall, and you can just use scan to your natural. And even if you run out of scans to your natural, you can say, okay, I know I only have 1 more scan. After I use this next scan, I will treat all my units into the main and just repair the depots, and the DTs can't do too much damage. Of course, War Prison DT, it's a different story, but that's a much bigger commitment, and it's a little bit harder to do after the blink opening. It's still something you'll see, but at least you're forcing your opponent to make a more significant commitment. The wall really helps constrict the mobility of DTs. So like that, he's his 2nd scan here. He has no more scans. DTs can do a lot of damage. He can pull up on top of the wall, raise the depot, and all these SCVs just put him on auto repair. He's fine. DTs can't do any more damage unless the Protoss finds a way to warp into the main. And then, of course, remember, because he took so little damage to the Blinkstalkers early on, he has this attack force that basically can't be stopped. So going forward from here, he's going to just, he canceled MC's expansion. There was a Nexus Beam build. He forced to cancel that. He's going to get a good trade here. Even if he doesn't trade that well here, it's 2 orbitals versus 1 Nexus. And because he has the wall, he's not dying to the DT counter. So it's a pretty awesome game. We're not going to play the next 7 minutes because MC eventually holds that attack in his main, but it's 1 base versus 2, and the next attack easily finishes him off. There's about a 50 supply difference. The most important thing is to recognize, 1, if you're Terran, you scout double gas. Scout for proxies. Second thing is, against Blinkstalkers, tanks are the most important thing to defend it if you have the option to get tanks. Now, a lot of times you won't have the tech up to get tanks. They're defending with Marines and Marauders, and you can do that too. It's not quite as easy, but it's very common. But if you have the option to get tanks and you get them, they're insanely powerful, but only if you keep very close watch on their positioning. So keep an eye on that. Make sure Blinkstalkers can't snipe them without taking a lot of losses. Then last of all, no matter what you're doing in TVP, TVZ, if you lose a wall, if you don't have a wall, always build a wall, right? If it goes down, rebuild it. Because against Zergling run-bys, against DTs, it's insanely useful. And that game right here, Innovation was way ahead, right? Because he held that push. If he didn't have that wall in, he could have easily lost that game. If DT's gotten his main and his natural and he didn't have no scans, he had no eBay even started then, he could have very easily straight out lost the game. Game over. And that's one way to win. To lose at 1 game, that's one way to win. A lost game as Protoss go DTs. As Terran, keep an eye out for the possibility, especially when you're ahead, especially if you know your opponent already has a Twilight Council. This wraps up the analysis on game number 1. We'll take a short break and be right on to game number 2.